Next up, I am thrilled to announce that we have Lorne Chedzey. He is the Chief Information Officer here at Ergo. He's a leader in technology for over 25 years, and according to him, this is the most exciting time to be in tech. So please, welcome to the stage, Lorne.
How do I follow that, right, with Professor John Kelleher and the knowledge he has, right, is very impressive. And I guess really for, Ergo is an ICT services provider in Ireland. We're really there where the rubber hits the road. So we try to, really take these concepts and turn them into reality to help you productionize systems, take them to market, and make sure that they're secure and compliant and they deliver what you require as a business. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Lorne Chedzey. I'm a CIO here at Ergo, and I've been with the company now for all up just under 10 years. During that time, we've gone through a number of different technology landscape transformations, but this is by far the biggest. And I had hair before AI rose onto the center stage. So the agenda that I'm going to cover off is different models of generative AI deployment. So customers ask a lot of questions around, what is the model that we should opt for? A lot of customers are asking, what is agentic AI? What's the best deployment options we have there as well? When you're productionizing a solution like this, there are a lot of things that you need to look out for, important items around productionization. So I have a piece on that. And then finally, I guess a nice way to wrap it all up into kind of like a getting started slide with 6 steps that will help you on your journey towards business value realization with generative AI. So just in the interest of time, I won't go through all of this, but I'll just bring your attention to the piece on the far side of the slide here, which is the Harvard Business Review. So 257 respondents were asked a question: what are they most focused on in regards to being ready for the adoption of generative AI? And the 2 areas was around, of highest score, 53%, was improving their data and their technical infrastructure. And I've got a good piece on that where we'll get into what does that mean and how can you do that. And then governance around generative AI. And when you're in a large organization, it's all about governance, particularly when you start moving into the world of autonomous agents and these types of things. You really need to have strong governance and controls. So when I'm speaking with customers, some of the questions that they're asking me around generative AI deployment is, where do we start? There's so many deployment options out there. Do we look at open source models? Do we look at proprietary systems? Do we look at on-premise, cloud? Where do we go there? So I'll attempt to kind of help you answer some of those questions. And the one thing that's going to probably bug you throughout my presentation is I'll keep bringing it back to use case, and I'll keep bringing it back to business value, because that's really what matters here. It's a very fast-paced, changing rapidly environment here in regards to generative AI, and for an old dog like me, that pace is unbelievable. So this concept of Moore's law is out the window. Agentic AI is doubling in capability every 7 months, so it's really fast. And with that, what's happening for our customers in some cases is there's an inertia as a result of that, because they're thinking, well, do I step in now? Oh, look, something else is just on the horizon. Maybe we'll wait for that, or is that the right thing to do? So hopefully through this presentation as well, I'll help you address some of that and feel a little bit more comfortable to step in. And then, as I said, the North Star really is business value. So in order to get to that North Star of business value, it's all about selecting the right use cases. And I'll also cover that in the latter end of my presentation. So let's dive right in and talk about open source versus proprietary, which is one of the big questions we get asked. So before I do that, how many people were kind of around in the IT industry when OpenStack first come on the scene in 2010? Can you raise your hands, please? Yeah, that's enough. Okay. So the one thing about open source and OpenStack was that I remembered speaking to a very clever young man working in a gaming company here in Ireland, and he was saying, look, Lorne, it's not rocket science. And my retort to that was that there was only one company at that time doing it, and that was NASA, right? So I think that when it comes to open source technology and productionizing open source technology, you really need to think about that. But there are pros to open source. So when you look at these open source LLMs, there is no license fee. You get access to the source code, so there's great transparency there, and with that, you can heavily customize that AI application. And if you run that model particularly within your own data centers and you have adequate security in place, there's great privacy for your data as well. And I see some companies in here that might work in industries where, you know, your IP is very important and you want to protect that, and you don't trust Mr. Trump and the fact that he might be able to access that data through public cloud providers, for example. But then some of the cons, right? Technical expertise is required with open source models, particularly to productionize them. And so you need to think about what they're going to be, and it's going to depend on use case, right? But ultimately, you're probably going to need data scientists, you're going to need data architects, developers with Python skills, for example, stuff like that. So there is quite an investment there. And then you have to take that into account when you're looking at that versus proprietary models and more ready-to-go AI agent solutions, which I'll get into next. There is an increased potential, and I say increased potential, for biases and inaccuracies in open source models, and that's primarily based on the fact that proprietary models, particularly those models that are specialized in certain industries and use cases, they've actually been very well trained, and therefore there is less of a chance of inaccuracies within those. So I guess it's just to look out for that you might need to invest more time with open source models, and there is limited production support. So I can see some of our customers from, say, financial services here, for example, you know, that limited production support might be quite a concern for you in regards to your regulatory requirements, and you might decide to move more to a proprietary model. So from a proprietary perspective, if we use something like, say, ChatGPT, and you'll probably access this as a corporate business through some platform like Azure AI. So that's high performance out the box, and you get that user-friendly API experience, albeit there is a limited number of APIs out the box, okay? So that's that limited control and customization I talk about below. There is speed to realize business benefit, and you get the production support. But the concern is always going to be with these proprietary solutions is vendor lock-in. You know, what's the longer term cost implication to this? And I always bring it back to this old school methodology of crawl, walk, run, right? It depends on where you are in your journey. If you're at the crawl stage and you're looking on where you want to start, then maybe a proprietary model is a safer bet. A model that provides a lot of ancillary services that all wrap around that model to make it easier to consume and to manage and develop. But that decision is up to you. So data privacy is a big driver for running this in your own data center. And look, that will come down to the level of security that you have within your environment, both on the perimeter and within, zero trust, etc. And it can be very cost effective, but only at scale. So you'll see there below I also talk about a high initial investment in on-premise solutions. And we all know that that's because you have to look at your data center. It has to have adequate power and cooling because these things run hot, right? Particularly if you're pumping large volumes of data through them. Those GPUs are expensive as well. So, and there is a lot of time that you need to find the right hardware solution, procure it, rack it, stack it, implement the software on top of it, etc. So, you know, that will take a lot of time and a lot of cost to do that. But on the plus side, if you actually have a kind of a defined set of hardware in your data center, you know, that can be a very predictable long-term cost because you know the cost of that. It's typically a CapEx investment. You've made that for 3 or 5 years, and you know what that is. The flip side of that argument, scale limitations, right? So you can't grow beyond the physical hardware footprint quickly without having to procure more hardware. So So they're all important factors, but also the expertise required to do this and the complexity of it. It's a little more challenging than having these ready-to-go platform services in the cloud where you can just go through a wizard and deploy a generative AI solution like you can, for example, through Azure AI. Now, we can help you. We work and we partner closely with Dell Technologies and NVIDIA to provide on-premise solutions which do have reference architectures, and they are definitely a lot more simple to deploy than perhaps open source models on-premise. But ultimately, it's still a question for you in regards to, do you favour privacy and data sovereignty and control over that more fast, integrated, scalable, simple model that you might get from a public cloud? So if I bring the focus now onto Azure and we look at, the ChatGPT LLM via Azure AI, or we look at Azure AI Foundry, and we have basically a selection there of ready-to-go services. So we have selections of all types of pre-trained models there, which are not just OpenAI. So there are open source models there like Hugging Face. There's loads of other third-party tools within that kind of ready-to-go ecosystem. And it can be very cost-effective starting out. And the reason that it's so cost-effective is because you only pay for what you use in the cloud. We all know this. But also the cloud providers are good at providing funding to help you get started. And my recommendation is, once again, if we're talking crawl, walk, run here, let the cloud vendors fund that. Let that make that actually a more cost-effective way for you to get started. Learn from your mistakes then on Microsoft's dime. Why not, right? They have something to gain from that too, okay? But ultimately, the other benefit you get is that flexibility and scalability of cloud. It's very hard when you launch any new digital service as to where is that going to scale? Where is it going to go? What other use cases are going to come from this? Very hard to predict that. And that's the benefit that cloud delivers in this space. And I think it's why Microsoft spent so much money on OpenAI and have invested so much time and resources, is because they know that. And it's very difficult to deliver something like this on-premise and predict how that's going to scale. There are data privacy concerns, and Microsoft have come out publicly to say that's not an issue. Trump's not getting his hands on your data, but that's a decision for you personally in your own organization. There will always be data transfer and usage fees associated with using public cloud services, particularly dependent on the architecture that you go for, and if you're looking to flow large amounts of data in and out of the cloud. And there is, of course, cloud vendor lock-in. So the Azure AI and AI Foundry platform of services is very compelling, right? It does really give you that simple button, but you're also using a lot of proprietary solutions there, and you are building your capability around this particular platform, and therefore you'll become very reliant on that in the future. So once again, it's a decision. And I'm trying to take a real balanced approach to this for you so that you can understand the pros and cons of both models. Personally, if it was me and I was starting out building these applications for myself and my own company, I'd probably take the crawl approach of starting with a public cloud offering, and then as it got more mature, I'd look to build on that and see if it makes sense to scale and to put that into an on-premise solution if there was a cost reason or a privacy reason to do that. Okay, we'll move into agentic AI. So maybe a raise of hands for how many people here are familiar with agentic AI? Yeah, it's out in the press, isn't it, right? It's the big buzzword now. And to start into this topic, I think it's probably good to just talk a little bit about adoption rates and where we're at the moment. It's very difficult for our customers right now to work out, do we get in now or do we wait, or, because you don't want to be early adopters, leading edge and or bleeding edge and have potential production issues, but likewise you also don't want to be technology laggards. And what we're seeing here is 29% of organizations globally are already using agentic AI in production, which is phenomenal, right? 44% are planning to do so in the next 12 months. So that, if you think about those numbers, we're talking essentially 3/4 of organizations will be using this within the next 12 months, if you believe that. So that to me means that within the next 12 months is probably the right time to look at delving into agentic AI, getting some pilots stood up and seeing what you can make of it. And before we get into some detail around the deployment options, I think I'll start right back at what exactly is an AI agent. You know, you're giving agency essentially to enable it to act upon whatever task or process is required. So essentially these agents use AI to automate and execute these processes, and that can be on behalf of a person, a team, or an organization. And unlike just interacting with a standard LLM where it's like a one-stage process, these task agents, these autonomous agents, they make decisions and act with minimal human intervention, and that's what makes them so powerful. And I kind of share maybe, you know, a few examples of how these might work, right? So I'll use the example of M365 Copilot. How many people have M365 Copilot? Yeah. Okay, about half the room, yeah. Not surprising, right? With M365 Copilot, it interacts with all of these particular buckets you see here, your workflows, the internet, your applications, your data. And ultimately, with M365 Copilot, if you wanted to ask it a question like, create me a report on the state of agentic AI, give that to me in less than 300 words. Put that into a formal business language. It'll go and it'll do all of that for you, right? And it'll basically go off, it'll go to the internet, it'll ground itself in that data, and it'll present and summarize that data back to you in the format that you need. So that's essentially an AI agent doing its job of surfacing that information back to you based on the prompt that you submitted into the agent. Likewise, ServiceNow AI agents, right? So ServiceNow are great at business workflows, right? They're particularly good in the service management space, and HR onboarding, for example, is a process which we all struggle with in bringing in new employees into the business. ServiceNow have HR onboarding processes that they've been using for years in their traditional tool set, and now they've brought out AI agents that can do this for you. So this agent can interact with that HR onboarding workflow. It can then go, okay, we're going to onboard this user onto these core applications. This user is part of this particular Entra ID or Active Directory group, and it'll then basically access your applications. It will grant access to those applications. It'll even update your CMDB with the asset information as well, right? So that's the type of thing that these agents can do from a task perspective. And they're just a few examples. There are so many agents out there in the marketplace right now, thousands of agents. And so I like to have a spectrum where I explain, you know, where do these different agents kind of fit in, starting from simple retrieval agents all the way up to more advanced or autonomous agents. So retrieval agents, they retrieve that information, they ground that data, and then they summarize and answer a user's question, just like the example I used earlier, M365 Copilot. It prompts your prompt and it retrieves. A task agent, when asked, it'll automate workflows and it'll replace those repetitive tasks for users. So if we use a ServiceNow task agent as an example for an IT service incident, it'll triage the incident, it'll assign the incident to the right group, and then it'll even potentially initiate the resolution of that IT incident. So that's an example of a task agent. And retrieval and task agents are very prevalent in the marketplace right now, okay? And so if you're looking at those, you're probably thinking, well, if it's a productivity-based application, I'm likely to look at Microsoft for that because they really know end-user productivity quite well. If it's a task agent around things like business process, maybe I'll look at ServiceNow as a great example of a good task agent. But what about autonomous agents? So, you know, these operate independently. These are the ones that we're all worried about as well, right? So they can dynamically plan and orchestrate. They can learn. They can escalate very human-like behaviour in a sense, albeit they're not really thinking, but they're behaving in a human way. And I like to use a good example of autonomous self-driving cars. And I'm going to ask everyone here to raise their hands, right? If I had out the front here, out the front of Trinity College, 100 odd self-driving cars, right? And I said, that self-driving car is going to take you from here to wherever you need to go. And let's just say that that might happen to be hurtling down the M50 at 100 kilometers an hour, right? In heavy traffic. Raise your hands if you would be comfortable to get into that self-driving autonomous car. Not many, yeah. And yeah, definitely the AI folks are okay with that, right? But I guess it's a small number. There was probably less than 5%, right? Now, is it that autonomous vehicles are unsafe? Don't know. There's a few stories, but not many. There's probably less accidents from autonomous vehicles than there are from people driving, through human error, right? So then you ask yourself, well, what is it? Do we trust it, right? So trust is a big issue with autonomous agents. And if you bring that into the corporate world, it's the same thing. So yeah, there's some work to do in regards to really surfacing strong, capable autonomous agents that can perform a series of multiple tasks. So there is a way to go there. So that's very much on the horizon in regards to autonomous agents. But there is also an issue of trust, and so with that comes, well, how do we protect ourselves there? So what systems, policies and procedures do we have in place to at least allow us to go, it's safe enough, I'll get into that car because I know there's enough there to protect me. And human safety is a big part, and having humans in the loop is a big part of utilising autonomous agents correctly. So then we talk about agent deployment options. So you can build your own agent if you like. So you'll have complete autonomy, you can pick the platform that you want, you can choose the programming language, you can develop the APIs that you want as well, because in enterprise organizations, sometimes it's not all nice and neat and tidy, and it's not a complete Microsoft portfolio, or it's not a complete AWS portfolio. It can be a blend of different things and third-party SaaS applications. And long-term, it can be very cost-effective. So we had a customer recently where we delivered a project in the educational space, and they could have done it with a ready-made Copilot solution, but in the end they decided to do it with, in fairness, it was a proprietary LLM, but ultimately we built that custom solution for them, and it took a while to do it, right? So we're talking 90 days or so of professional services to build that custom agent. So it cost them a lot of money, but the cost of running that is only a few hundred euros per month based on the usage of the underlying LLM and some of the platform services, versus $30 per user per month for the agent. And considering you have thousands of students and thousands of staff, that just wouldn't be feasible, okay? So I guess the idea here is really to explain that, once again, comes back to use case. What is the use case, and therefore what is the right option? The cons, as I said, takes time, and you will need expensive specialist skills to build your own agents, or you'll need to bring them in, a partner like ourselves or Adapt, to help you build these solutions. And you'll need to think about all your deployment considerations. Where are you going to run this? If it's going to be on-prem, there's a lot of stuff you need to think about. If it's in the cloud, are you already set up in the cloud? If not, you probably have to go through a fairly sizable process there, particularly if you're an enterprise organisation. DPIAs and all that good fun. And then there's ongoing maintenance and support. So you can pay someone to do that, or you can take that on yourself, but there is the cost associated with that. If I move over to the far right-hand side, the ready-made agents, I'll pick on Microsoft Copilot here again. So you get immediate business value realization on the basis that there is, you get immediate business value realization based on the fact that there is, the use case fits well with the actual solution that you're looking for, that it's ready-made. And you do get continual improvements offered when you buy into a subscription from one of these platforms and you get the production support. But you have to ask yourself around the cost over the long term, the flexibility and customization, and sometimes, not all, but in some times there is issues with integrations with outside of platform providers as well. And then we have the middle use case, which is the agent studio use case. So ServiceNow have an agent studio, for example. Microsoft have Copilot Studio. These are a ready-to-go framework, and it's like Lego building blocks, right? So it's customizable, it's extensible, but you have all of these various services all within inside Copilot Studio that can enable you to plug everything together. It's not entirely ready-made, and you'll still need some skills, but you probably won't need deep data science skills to address some of the issues here. Once again, cost effectiveness, lock-in versus building your own agent on your own platform that you need to consider as well. And so then customers say, when I present this slide, they say, well, does that mean that AI agent studios are in that kind of Goldilocks zone? You know, the porridge is not too hot, it's not too cold, it's just right. I'm going to come back again to use case, right? It depends on the use case. If your board is saying to you, I need you to deploy AI in the next 6 months, and I need to make sure that we're leveraging that, just maybe the best thing to do is go out and get a ready-made agent and start on your journey there, and there's less to think about there. Or maybe, you know, if you want to take your time, then maybe you'd rather take a long-term view and you'd like to build your own agent. And that'll take extra time, but potentially over time that'll save you a lot in TCO in regards to the running cost. So important things to watch out for when deploying AI. I could talk about this for an hour, right? But I've only got about 5 minutes apparently from someone holding their hand up in the back of the room. Data strategy, quality, and accessibility. Do you have a data strategy? What is it? How do you access and take advantage of data within your organization? Is there quality data? Is there integrity? How do you access that data? Are they in silos, or are they beautifully in a nice central data lake, or there's a data fabric in place, right? That's a big thing you need to address. We can help you with that within Ergo. Security and privacy. Professor Hickton is going to talk about this later, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail, but there's a lovely new landscape for bad actors and malicious insiders to take advantage of now as a result of this. And so it's a very important area to focus in on, and I'll let Professor Hickton cover that. Then we have compliance. The EU AI Act is upon us in the next few months. Okay, so if you're using any AI services, you need to get ready for that. You might also, if you love a good ISO audit, right? ISO 14001 is the standard, and if you're interested in looking at that, we can also help advise you on that as well in regards to where you are on your compliance journey. You're going to have organisational challenges. You're going to have people that won't want to adopt it. You're going to have people that want to adopt it in an unsafe manner. And you're going to have to think about how you structure your organisation to cope with all of this, to add the right governance within your organisation. And I'll talk in the next slide around how you might build an AI council to help provide some governance around that. Ethical considerations, huge topic. Could spend an hour on this, right? So, human safety, algorithmic bias, fairness, environmental considerations or impacts. All of these things are things that you need to take into account, as well as potential job losses, right? And the concerns around that and people's livelihood. So all of those need to be addressed. And continuous improvement. Now, if it's a ready-to-go AI solution like I'm calling out here, you don't need to worry about training a model or any of those kind of things, right? Because it's not your platform. But you still need to think about how your users are engaging with that platform. So what we do in Ergo, for example, when we deploy a Copilot solution into our customers, we wrap it around our change and adoption management services to ensure that the users continuously improve on how they engage and get more value and extract more value out of the solution, because there's nothing worse than having a very expensive per user per month solution sitting out there and your users are not actually using it. And you've got to bring Muhammad to the mountain and the mountain to Muhammad a little bit, right? They've both got to come together, because with new IT systems, people have to change their way of working if they want to take advantage of them as well. So that's an important factor. And when you look at custom AI solutions, it's double trouble, right? So there's all these other things then you need to think about. So design, deploying and hosting, I spoke about that earlier. Cost management. You think, oh yeah, well in the cloud that's very important, right, from a cost management perspective, because you can very quickly get bill shock if you don't basically put the correct alerts in place. Yeah, that's right. But cost management in on-premise solutions is also important, because electricity is not cheap. And I'm sure you all know that, you know, a standard GBT query, if you've been reading this in the press, I think it uses enough power to power a electric vehicle for 10 kilometers of range. So if you think about that, you've got to think about how you're very wise in who gets access to these systems, if it's an on-premise platform, and essentially how you control those costs. So power management is important in the data center. Specialist skills will be required, which you may not require with a ready-to-go AI solution. And you might need to invest a lot of time in training models, and if you're using a platform like TensorFlow to do code optimization to ensure that the latency from prompt to inference is reduced, you'll need to do work on that. And then you'll need to do performance monitoring on both the underlying platform of the infrastructure, but also on the application itself. And then scale, right? So scalability is a huge concern, because it's not a SaaS solution like the ready-to-go AI agent. You've got to have to think about how you're going to scale that yourself. So there's a lot to think about there. So once again, I bring it back to the crawl, walk, run piece. Maybe start crawling first and then move on to the more complex custom solutions thereafter, or bring a partner in to help you with the more complex solutions. Last slide, I promise. I know you're probably struggling at this stage. The break's coming. Ergo would recommend kind of 6 steps that you can take on your journey towards this Gen AI Summit of business value realization. And we start with the foundation. You know, my view anyway, when we help customers with AI strategy, it's really about mapping it to your business strategy, you know, because what's important to the business over the next 3 years, you need to address that and look at that through the lens of AI and how it can help the business achieve those objectives. And it might even be something as simple as saying, for the next 12 months, whatever we deploy, it's going to be an inward-facing application. It's not going to touch the customer, because ultimately we want this to be a risk-free experience for the organization. Next, we get to a very important one, which is the battery is running low. I think that might be metaphorical, because I think everyone's battery's running low here now. Coffee's coming. So the next thing about use case generation, right, is that you can do this yourself. If you've got good business analysts, right, you can get these people out spending time, bring your IT, your data folk in, run workshops. And the questions that you're going to have to be asking is, what's going to save me time? What's going to save me money? Or what's going to generate revenue, right? And depending on your own business strategy, you can probably work out which one is a priority there. But if you ask those 3 questions and you look to elicit feedback from those business unit folks, they can really help you with that. If you have any Lean Six Sigma type folks out there, green belts, that know how to do value stream mapping, if it's about saving time and money in processes, AI and task-based AI can really help there. So go out and value stream those processes. Identify all of the waste and all of the wait times, and then do an as-is to be. Or you can bring in a partner like ourselves and Adapt to help you with use case generation. So we can basically run half-day workshops with you around identifying what is the right use case, and we can help you whittle that down to ones that are particularly suitable to pilot, which will be, as you can see there, low-risk, high-reward candidates. But before you do that, the next thing after that is readiness. You need to do a data audit. So we can come out and we can have a look at where is all your data. It's all what I spoke about earlier, right? Data strategy, data architecture. Is your data clean? Is it ready to consume? Is it in silos, or is it all central? Do a technology audit. If you're going to run it on premise, It's a bigger task if you're going to run it in the cloud. Are you set up with a cloud provider? And then we also need to then look at a people audit. So that's a people audit in regards to the people that are going to help design and build and deliver and support this, but it's also AI literacy amongst all of your business users. And that's something that we can definitely work with Adapt on around helping organisations with AI literacy training. That's something they do in conjunction with Trinity College here. Then you get to productionisation. That's that horrible slide I showed earlier where there's just so much to it, right? And my advice there is start with a production application that is inward facing to mitigate the risk. That's where you should start. If you make any mistakes, it's not as bad as having customer facing experiences being impacted. And then finally, maintain and improve. So feedback loops, user feedback loops, monitoring and providing a standard operating procedure to operate this platform moving forward and to continuously improve. So hopefully that was of use for everyone, and I'm about to wrap up now, so I'd like to say thank you, and I will be around during the coffee break if anyone wants to ask any questions. Thank you.